Our final segment for understanding MAD modifiers is talk about our D category, dangling modifiers. So let me put up an example of what a dangling modifier is. Okay, so a dangling modifier is a modifier phrase that's hanging out in the wrong spot. That's why it's dangling. It's hanging out in the wrong spot, not modifying the correct word. It's hanging out next to the wrong crowd, okay, the wrong word. That's what you need to mentally think about. Now, let's look at this sentence. Dangling modifier is so easy to recognize this pattern. It's always going to be the same pattern where we have a modifier phrase at the beginning of our sentence followed by something that it's modifying. So visually, if you can say to yourself, this is the visual pattern that my dangling modifier sentence type will look like, it'll help you trigger to find the potentially the dangling modifiers in your sentence. So I look up here and I go, oh, I have an introductory phrase followed by some kind of subject that it should be modifying or that it is modifying. This potentially could be a dangling modifier. Now here's what you do with your pen to test out whether or not I have a clear modifier relationship or my modifier phrase is hanging out in the wrong spot. I'm going to circle my entire modifier phrase. Circle the entire modifier phrase and then draw an arrow to the subject that comes next to it. And then I'm going to test it out by verbally stating the modifier phrase after the subject to see if in fact the modifier phrase is accurately talking about or describing that subject that the sentence has positioned it to talk about. So let's talk through this process with our sentence. I'm just going to read the sentence once so that you can hear it. After reading my resume, I would like an interview. Now, you might hear that sentence and your ear might say, that sounds pretty good. I don't find a problem with it. But again, we recognize because I've got that intro modifier phrase followed with a comma and a subject, that's an indicator I've got to test out the relationship. So I circle the whole thing, I draw an arrow to the subject that comes next, dotted line to go, I'm going to test it after the subject to see if in fact that is what it's modifying. So let me restate it according to my test. I, after reading my resume, would like an interview. Well, clearly, I'm not the one who needs to read my own resume and then get an interview. What I'm trying to say is, after you read my resume, I would like an interview. But what's happened is, I've put that modifier phrase and it's hanging out next to the wrong subject. So I need to restate the sentence and clarify that modifier phrase. Here's one way that you could do that. Okay, I've rewritten the sentence to say, after you read my resume, I would like an interview. Let's do our test for a potentially dangling modifier. I'm just doing this so they can see visually what to do again. Okay, so now let's see if the relationships are clear. I, after you read my resume, would like an interview. Now the relationships are clear, and I know that that verb action of reading the resume belongs to you, not to this subject. So this is, in fact, a good modifier relationship. Let's look at one more sentence and test it out for a dangling modifier. Now remember, the visual pattern that I'm looking for is some kind of introductory phrase followed by a subject. Generally, that's going to say, oh, this could be potentially a dangling modifier. So I look at this sentence and I go, okay, I have this introductory phrase. It actually kind of extends right there. And here is my subject. Let's test out the relationship. So this modifier phrase is in the sentence modifying this subject, and I'm going to verbally place it right here. Your manager, to succeed in this job, should mentor you. Is that what I'm trying to say? That the manager, in order for him to succeed, he has to mentor you? Clearly that's not what I'm trying to say. This is a dangling modifier. It's a modifier phrase that's hanging out next to the wrong word. So I'm going to reshape my sentence to clarify that modifier relationship. I'm just going to say for you to succeed in this job, I think. Right? Good enough? That's better. Okay, so now we have a new sentence. To succeed in this job, you should ask your manager to mentor you. Let's take our pen and test it out to see if the modifier relationship is clear and correct. So our modifier phrase is to succeed in this job, and the subject that comes next is you. So let's test that out. You, to succeed in this job, should ask your manager to mentor you. And in fact, that is a correct and clear modifier relationship. So this sentence is good.